Now, there's one guy that's at the center of this. It's Charles Manson. He ordered all of this done to ignite a race war, even though how would any of that do it? Okay.
So that doesn't make sense. But he is nevertheless at the center of this because he's the glue of the family, right?
He exerts a tremendous amount of psychological control over them.
How was he able to do that? Sorry to interrupt. Like what? Because you said he was a petty criminal. It does seem he was pretty prolific in his petty crimes. Like he did a lot of them.
He had a lot of access to LSD.
Okay.
Okay, which he started getting at the free clinic in San Francisco. So lots of it floating around. Some descriptions of the family at Spawn Ranch is that people were basically taking acid on a daily basis, which, by the way, was also a potential problem with Linda Kasabian's testimony, since she also admitted to being high most of the time and also thinking she was a witch. All right, so you want to put her, okay, where do you want to go with that? See, if Manson wasn't Manson, if he hadn't acted like if he hadn't actually acted like the crazed hippie psycho goofball that Bugliosi painted him as being, then Kasabian's testimony wouldn't have been as strong, because the first thing against her is you've got an immunity for telling the story the prosecution wants. That's a little iffy. And we won't even bring in the witch and the drugs and being in love with Bobby Beausoleil. All right. So if Manson had, been dressed like you, sitting there in a suit and tie, and had behaved himself and spoken normally, things might have. This isn't to say that he wasn't guilty as hell. So what he supposedly did was to inspire all of these killings. And I think that's probably, sort of beginning with the Hinman killing. He told them to go over there and get the money, one way or the other. I don't know whether it's clear whether he told them, if you don't get the money, kill him, but Hinman's dead. And then we might also have seen the value in terms of having copycat killings as a way of throwing off any other kind of blame. The other story you get is that one of the people who had lived at the Cielo house where Sharon Tate was before was a record producer by the name of Terry Melcher. Melcher supposedly, as the general story goes, had welched on a deal with Manson in terms of a record contract. He screwed over Manson in some sort of a record deal, and Manson wanted to get revenge and sent them to kill everybody in the house. Which again doesn't make much of sense. One, Manson knew that Melcher wasn't living there anymore. He probably knew where Melcher was living. If he wanted to get Melcher, he could have found him. It wasn't that difficult to do. And so it's not revenge on Terry Melcher that drew him there. He was familiar with the house, so if the idea was to simply commit random killings that would that would muddy the whole waters with the Hinman killing, then you might pick some place you knew of. You knew the place was rented out. There would be someone there and you really didn't care. In the same way that the La Bianca seemed to have been. Manson was familiar with that because it supposedly had been the scene of creepy crawling. This is little interesting things that the family would be taught to do. Creepy crawling is when you sneak into somebody's house at night while they're there asleep or when they're not there, and you move things around. So when they get up in the morning or they come home, they'll suddenly notice that someone has been in their house, which will freak them out, which is the whole point of that.
But it doesn't seem like the murder or the creepy crawling was creepy crawling may be, but it doesn't seem like the murder, like some of the other people you've covered, like the Zodiac Killer, the murder is the goal. Maybe there's some psychopathic kind of artistry to the murder that the Zodiac Killer had and the messaging behind that.
Yeah.
But it seems like with at least the way you're describing it with the Charles Manson family, the murder was just they just had a basic disregard for human life, and the murder was as a consequence of just operating in the drug underworld.
So Manson set up a kind of base at a thing called the Spawn Movie Ranch, which was an old movie ranch out on the northwest edge of LA. And they just kind of camped out there. He used the girls, in particular Squeaky Frome, to get the owner or operator, I think George Spahn, to let them hang out there. And basically, she slept with him, and he was perfectly happy to let them hang out. They also had a place out in the desert that they had. They dealt in credit card fraud, stolen cars. It was kind of a chop shop that they ran out of the place. So he had a fairly good little criminal gig going, which with the protection he had probably would have. The one thing they couldn't cover him on was murder.